Welcome to the NBA Hangout presented by Playbook Sports. I'm your host, Brandon. With me, as always, is Dave. Dave, how are you?
Things good, Brandon. How are you, pal?
I'm great. It's opening night. We got basketball that we can talk about. There's basketball going on still. So we're going to talk about it. We got Celtics to talk about, of course, and who are other contenders for the championship this year, who could possibly even stop them because they're looking kind of crazy one game in. So these are these are objective takes, of course. A lot of extensions were heading out, so we'll dive into that. And we also got some teams who might break out, some players and teams who we think can have a year that can propel them further in the future. So how was your week anticipating the NBA tip off today?
It was good. The end of preseason was pretty fun as teams started to actually play more of their starters longer. So it kind of felt like the NBA season may have started on the weekend. And I don't know, today's Boston game, it just feels like a victory lap. It doesn't feel like the season's begun.
It just feels like a continuation of the last season with what's going on in Boston. So we'll talk about that first. Let's get into it. So Boston did play the Knicks today, and they just completely dismantled the Knicks in the NBA opener today. It was pretty one-sided. They hit 29 threes, tying an NBA record. So that was just absurd. It felt like, as we kind of touched on, they picked up just where they left off, winning the championship. So what are your first impressions on the 2024-2025 Boston Celtics?
How did they not hit a three in the last 11 minutes?
They got at least some things for later on in the season. They can't do it all in one game.
Maybe I can, as a rest of the NBA fan, just stretch and extrapolate something here, just reach. Does it show that there is some weakness in the Boston Celtics that they could not just get the record done? They had 11 minutes to hit a 3-pointer. They hit 29 beforehand. No one could do it.
I know.
I refuse to believe that they didn't want to do it.
Yeah, no, right. They wanted that. They're in prime position to do it. And, this happens with the Boston Celtics, though. They get tight. Sometimes when they get into pressure situations, they get tight and things happen. So if there is anything that we can stretch and dig into there and extrapolate, would be they do get tight when things get a little tense. And even though this game was intense, that record was on the line, and they weren't able to take the record this time. So maybe they'll be able to do it later on in the season. Their offense just looks like it's incredible. Like, that 5-out is just too much. And then when you add KP to the mix, and when that's all humming together, it's just a lot. I think one thing to touch on, though, is how Tatum started off. He had a lot of noise about how he played in the finals last year, a lot of noise about how he didn't play in the Olympics. So for him, I think just to get the monkey off the shoulder, as to say, to have a coming out player like this in your first game in this season, I thought was a good look for him.
Are we going to read a Tatum tell-all book 10 years from now, where he just is oh yeah, I was hurt at the end of the 2024 season, right? Because yeah, he looks good. He looks smooth. He looked confident. Whereas at the end of the season last year, he'd throw up a shot and it would just be short. It was weird.
Yeah. And there's no energy into it. The energy is kind of zapped from those shots. I think for him, just coming in with nice rhythm, having the confidence. This is his team. As much as Jaylen Brown did win the 2 MVPs in the postseason last year, it still is Jaylen Brown's team is always going to be looked at as that. So I think to come into his own, his comfortable environment, he's at home, and to get this performance off would be great for his confidence. I mean, a guy last week, we're talking about MVP candidates, and Jalen Brunson, a guy who he played, was ahead of him, if I remember in those odds. Tatum wasn't even on the list there.
No.
But Brunson was. I think this is a good start to his campaign. If he is looking to make that MVP leap, I think, like we mentioned, it's wide open. And maybe, Boston's going to have a good record. So they're going to have that on their side. If he could string together a really good season here, he could be in the talks for one of those MVP seasons. I know we're one game in, so hyperbole is going to be all over the place. But I think this is fair for Tatum for how his career has gone so far.
Yeah, he can certainly do it, but like, is it? Do people like him enough to vote for him? Like, he would have to have this pretty stellar year where it's unquestionable that Tatum's the MVP for people to be like, oh, toss up Tatum or, Giannis again. Everybody loves Giannis. Let's just give it to Giannis, right?
Yeah,
I just,
yeah.
like, I hate to jump on a guy's like personality, but to me, it's the final, like Tatum's final form is if he can just like figure out a way to just have a little bit more charisma, even if it's just like poking fun at himself or something. I'm not sure. It's just like that would make him go from like really good player to like perennial MVP candidate, face of the league, candidate. Um, there's like one level more that he could achieve. Like you said it before we came on air. Like he's just too much of a normal guy who's really good at basketball. Like
Yeah.
and maybe we're spoiled in like the LeBron Curry era where like everyone who's really good at basketball is also just such a good ambassador for the sport as well. That it's like, you see a guy like Tatum, and I'm almost frustrated as a fan that like I don't like him more. Right.
Yeah. No, because he has a great game. He's worked on it. He's improved almost every year he's been in the league, and he's became one of the best players in the NBA. By that. But when you look at the guy talk about faces in the league, a guy on the TV right now is Anthony Edwards as we record this, and he has all of that. He might not have the game
In
as efficient
spades.
as Tatum, but that personality, that next level that everyone's looking for, you see it in a guy like Anthony Edwards. So when we talk about teams who could challenge Boston, do we see a team like Minnesota being able to answer that call?
I'm gonna have to see what like new Minnesota, like how this game goes. I want to see a couple games with like Julius there, and like they've got Rob Dillingham in like a pretty high profile role. So it'll be interesting to see how they do. Like right now, the only team to me that has a chance is Oklahoma. Like they're just the only team that feels deep enough that can just like run wave after wave with the Boston Celtics.
Yeah, and they might have that thing too of being too young to not know better. Still,
Yeah.
just being able to kind of go out. They're tremendous time. I just worry about their youth on that team. Still, I think they might be like a year or two away from really being that dominant team that we want them to be. I think season wise they'll be great, but I think when it comes to the playoffs, there's still going to be some questions for that team to answer. Staying on Minnesota though, like and Anthony Edwards, they had an Adidas ad today too. And it was just that it came out, and it was just greatly done. Like he has all those superstar qualities, but sometimes he is missing the basketball stuff that Tatum does have, which is an interesting contrast. I think Minnesota defensively poses a tough question for Boston. If we're looking at teams that can potentially match up to them in the future, I think they split their games last year when they played each other, so they do match up kind of nice to them, but. I think you're right. This is Ant's first year of being like the guy. Like it's solely his team. Cat's gone. Now you're the offensive engine for real. You have to be the leader. They're now giving you the keys fully. You can't kind of have Cat to fall back on. So I'm interested to see how Anthony Edwards handles that, because I'm sure there's going to be some bumps in the road with that. I think that's going to be a great indicator of what this team can be once we see a little bit more of how that goes.
Yeah, this team has really gone to a team that's going to go as far as like Anthony Edwards wants to take them. Like the whole thing is now built around Ant, right? Like you're not going to see McDaniels and Rudy Gobert take this team on like a 10-game run, right? They'll be key contributors, but like the engine's going to be driven by Edwards, and Minnesota is going to go as far as he wills them partly. Right.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of good like supporting pieces, but this is an Anthony Edwards team. You are 100% correct.
Yeah. So we'll see how if he's able to take them to that new height, and if not, then we'll have to see what Minnesota does to kind of help him out. I think that's the interesting thing about where Minnesota's at right now. They still have moves that they can make if they need to do so, and or they could be stand pat for a little bit if they're if they're good
They
enough.
don't have many picks.
They don't have many picks, but they do have depth now, which they can trade. Like they
true.
have players, they have young guys now. They have like a guy like Dunham will be appealing to other teams if it comes to that, which I don't think it will. But um, those options are there. I think any other teams that we can look at, like we did talk about before the season started, teams were looking at the Knicks as one of those teams that would be at the top of the Eastern Conference, and we kind of get like this is not really a fair judgment of the two because it's so early in the season, but we get like a little glimpse into what that matchup kind of looks like in this present day.
Yeah, and that's kind of the interesting thing and the depressing thing about this one game is that like New York was one of those teams where you were really hoping like this team feels complete. They feel like they've really got it all together. They're ready to push for the championship this year. And like they put up 109 points. And that's a really good offensive showing for New York. It's just that Boston put up over 130 points. So it's a little disappointing because like New York is supposed to be a defensive team and they just got walked. I mean, it's early in the season. It's game 1, right? You don't get locked in defensively this early in the year, right? Without like getting to the playoffs healthy. So I think New York looked good. I really liked McBride, mostly because like an opportunity arose with like Dante going to Minnesota, and so McBride showed out really well. Everybody looks like they fit together really nicely. So I think they're in a good spot. I just like that performance from Boston was so good that I've almost elevated them to a new place in my mind.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like there's not a lot of teams right now that I feel comfortable saying are on that level at the moment.
Yeah, no, it really feels like they're like a step above everybody in this moment, especially when you start off the season like that. I think the interesting thing for New York is what kind of opened my eyes with them was their bench. It was just so rough offensively when Jalen Brunson's just not on the court, when you don't have that engine. You can play through Karl Anthony Towns, but you kind of still need a guard with him to kind of make things happen, which I think was a great thing. And if you're looking at it from a positive side, is with Miles McBride, as you mentioned, like I think he had a good game. He had 22 points, and he was really out there shooting. He looked confident. He was able to get to the rim a little bit. So I think coming off the bench, I think he's going to be a very important piece, and I think as far as he goes, is gonna be as far as the Knicks goes for a certain degree, because he's going to be kind of like that guy. They don't have much coming off of that bench. Like you have Campaign as well, who's been around the league. He's able to run an offense to a certain extent as well. He's done it on the Suns, so he's had some experience doing that, but I don't think it's ideal. And then it's really, really, really thin beyond that, especially when you don't have Mitchell Robinson back as yet, and who knows when he's coming back. So I think for the Knicks, that depth is really starting to bother me more and more as we look at it. We'll see how they manage it throughout the season. Thibodeau tends not to play a lot of guys anyway, so it might not matter. That might just counteract itself naturally with that. But defensively, you're right. They're gonna have to figure out a way to compete on that end. Having Cat at 5 is a trouble. Tibbs struggled with that in the past, so we'll see if he's able to adapt and make that something that's not too much of an issue moving forward. Other teams that were in that talk, I guess, was Denver and Philadelphia at the time. But Philadelphia now with starting the season off this way with 2 injuries to your two of your main stars and just leaving Maxey out to dry is really doesn't really give positive signals for this season, even though it could be fine. It could be just a week thing and everyone's healthy and it's fine.
Didn't Maxey just get a thumb contusion though?
Mm-hmm.
So like,
but he's young, so he could play through it.
On paper, Philadelphia looks really good. This early season Philadelphia is giving everyone pause, I think. And I think Philadelphia is the one that's really going to blow up predictions all year. So people were pretty high on them. They looked good. They looked like they were ready to go. I think they're going to start really slowly. I think they'll find themselves towards the end of the year, maybe like Christmas onward kind of thing. But I think the first couple months are going to be kind of tough in Philly. I think they're going to lose a surprising amount of games. And like that could still mean like a winning record, but like we were considering this team to win, probably close to like 55 games.
Yeah.
And like right now, is 47 too many games for Philadelphia?
Right. I think it's a lot tighter, especially with the competition in the East. I think that kind of balances things out. There's a lot of good teams in the East that, like, if you have like a 4-game losing streak, I think it's going to matter this year. It mattered a lot last year. And I think it's going to matter the same this year in the East. Those teams are just so close together. So yeah, it does give me a little bit of pause about what their season outcome, but I think their goal ultimately is to be healthy come the playoffs. And once the playoffs come, I think they want to be able to make some noise there. And it'll be hard to see. It'll be hard to judge this team throughout the season, I think. But I think Nurse, if there's any coach that can kind of manage it, I think Nurse is one of the better ones who could be able to pull out a little extra workload for some guys here and there. He's able to work guys in, find them different roles and all that type of stuff. He's pretty adaptable to new situations. So I think on that front, they'll be okay. But I think it is tough. I don't know how much you're going to get your team healthy throughout this season. Just knowing Paul George's health and Embiid's health. And then who knows when you're running Maxey into the ground, what's going to happen too, because you're going to be relying on him a lot right now. Yeah, and Denver. I guess Denver is the other team there that could challenge them. But which I feel like every year we do start off this season quiet on Denver, and then by the end of the year we're like, oh yeah, that's a team we should be looking out for.
Yeah, Denver. Come on, we were on them all year. Yeah. It's I think one of the challenges with Denver is just that, like, since they've won the championship, they haven't done anything splashy. And like the NBA has become such a splashy league where it's like, oh, you haven't won the NBA championship in 2 years? Well, you should be trading for Embiid and Jokic. What a pairing, right?
Yeah.
But there's nothing like that with them. It's guys walk away from Denver and then they just find another guy. The biggest thing that's happened to them is that they locked up
Aaron Gordon.
They locked up Aaron Gordon, which was really good. That was a really good piece of business. So, we'll see you at the end of the year, Denver, when you're playing for 60 wins.
Yeah, being a threat. I think, if they're able to get to the finals, if Jamal Murray's healthy, and Michael Porter's shooting well and doing all the things right on defense. I think the only issue there is who's that next guy that's going to step up for them since they lost some of their role players. Aaron Gordon's still there, but Christian Brown's really going to have a year for them, I think, for it to really, really, really pan out for them. Yeah, I think that's good on the contenders there. I think those are the basis for our contenders. Those are the teams that threaten the Celtics, who feel like they're in a tier of their own. I think you can move on to some of these extensions. We mentioned Aaron Gordon, so he got his 4-year, $133 million, extension, among others who got extensions. So we have the list up here. Jalen Green, he gets a 3-year, $106 million extension with a player option with the Rockets. Sengun gets 5 years, $185 million. Jalen Johnson, 5 years, $150 million for the Hawks. Trey Murphy III gets 4 years, $112 million. Jalen Suggs, 5 years, $150 million. Rudy Gobert, 3 years, $110 million with a player option and a trade kicker. I guess some notable guys who didn't get any extensions is Jonathan Kuminga and Josh Giddey of the Bulls and the Warriors. Are the two that have not gotten any extensions. So looking at that list just right off the bat, anyone that really stands out to you?
Jalen Green is obviously like the odd one with just like the term, and then it makes me, it's a bet on yourself thing. And Jalen was trending up, and he might be renegotiating for a max in 3 years. Where some of these other guys, this may be the most lucrative contract they get, or their next one looks pretty much the same. But it also makes me wonder about, like, we've talked about Houston, like, getting ready for a trade. Does this make him more tradable or less tradable? I feel like more for some reason. I mean, he's not locked in as much, so that, like, if you're trading for Jalen Green, you would want the longer term. But if you're Houston, does it make him more flexible to put into packages? It's it's different. So it's very interesting in that sense. Like, I'm glad he got paid. But it is different with just the 3 years. And trade him to the Raptors. We'll take his 3 years.
Yeah. Raptors could use a score like that.
Could use
that'd be fun.
like that.
That'd be fun. He'd look good in that purple. But yeah, no, I think you're right. Like, that one is an odd one to stand out. You don't generally see that the 3 years there, but yeah, I think it's a bet on. He wants to bet on himself and then negotiate probably for a max contract in a couple years if he can show his play. Which will be a tough thing to do in this Houston team, which is so loaded at the guard position, and Reed Shepard's there. So yeah, I think he is a guy that they're going to still look to move. I don't think this stops that at all. I think that he'll still be on their mind as a guy that they're going to throw in as a sweetener here and there. And I guess now, if you're a team trading for him, you have the flexibility of when you acquire him, if, like, how much you want to extend, or if you want to extend him. He does have that player option, so he can lock into that last year if he gets injured or if he has a down year or anything like that. But after that, you would have a lot of flexibility with what you would want to do with him in just like 3 years. So I think it does make him a little bit more appealing. I didn't even think about it from like the trade aspect until you kind of brought it up. But yeah, I think that makes sense there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. It's worth watching. I think Houston's a team worth watching for some fun stuff. Yeah.
I think for sure there'll be some interesting things going on there, because they're in that middle of that pack in the East too, and they gotta do things to to figure some things out there. I guess sorry mid of the West, because my mind's on Jalen Suggs as the other player who had an extension that kind of threw me for a loop. Jalen Suggs, who I do really do respect as a defender. I think he was on the all defensive team. I snubbed him last year. I remember I heard about that. But yeah, he's a tremendous defender. He is a fairly decent offensive player. He's good offensive player, not explosive by any means on the offensive end, but he does the right things. He knows how to play the right style of basketball. He's good for the Magic. I was still shocked that he got the 5 years, $150 million with sort of his injury history. I know he was a little better last year, but I was still shocked that they locked him up for that long and didn't try to get him for a little less.
So was I, and then like Rudy gets his extension today, and I think there's like a trend going on in the NBA where if you are an elite defender who can like put up enough offense to stay on the floor, or be a 4-time defensive player of the year, you're getting paid now. Whereas like previously, defenders always came with like a discount, right? Like, oh, he's a great defender. He's like amongst the league's best. What'd you get him for? 30% of our star. Like, but now they're getting 80 to 90% of what a star makes just to be a great defender. And it shows that like it's really important, obviously, to win a championship. But I think like the league is just beginning to like value the skill set a lot more.
Yeah. I think that's right. I think they do value defense, which is great news, because I love me some defense. So that's good. They are valuing these guys a little bit more, like Herb Jones. I think he gets a decent one too. So I think that's a good thing as well. I was a little shocked with how the Magic's makeup is. Like I feel like they just need a little more offensive juice on their side of things. But I think you're locking down your core. You don't want anyone else to get Jalen Suggs. You want to make sure he's there for this build, which is, I think this is what this is signaling, which is great. I think him and Banker can work out something in the long run together. So I think locking him in is good. Making sure you don't lose him is good as well. So I guess in the long sense, it does make a little bit of sense, but I still just felt like a lot.
Yeah,
I think also too. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, it's like when I think of the Magic, I don't think of it as like a Suggs team. I think of it as a Banchero Franz Wagner team. Um, so maybe I'm sure there's like advanced stats people out there who will be like, "Oh, you're just sleeping on Suggs. This guy's actually unbelievable." Blah blah blah.
And his offense is, I don't want to like undersell his off. Like, it is good and it's gotten better in the last couple of years. The shots looked a little bit better. He is a good playmaker. It's just when the shot doesn't look good, it gets a little tough for him sometimes. And the Magic have a lot of those.
Well, and it just feels like the Magic have been searching for a lead point guard for a long time. And here you're paying him like he's a lead point guard. But, we're talking about him doing everything but lead the team, right? Like he plays his role well. He's a star role player right now. And maybe the Magic just see him growing into that lead point guard and being like a top 15 point guard in this league. And we're gonna be like eating crow by like December, but right now, yeah, you're right. Like it just feels like a lot. And it's not just like the fact that like NBA contracts are larger than ever. It's just like it's really close to a max, right? And just like percentage of what you can pay a guy just feels like a lot.
Yeah, especially in this new CBA, which it looked like other teams were kind of trying to do the opposite, where we didn't get any max extensions from these guys. We got people under it. Even Jalen Johnson, who rightfully deserves all that 5/150, he didn't get a max. Sengun didn't get the max either. He got very close to it, but they didn't get it, which I think is a little indication of teams just being like, we're not just going to hand out these maxes anymore. We're going to have to do a little bit negotiating. You'll still get good money, like you'll still be taken care of and all that, but you'll get your years. You'll get your years, but you might not get the most money that you could possibly get.
Well, doesn't a max also come with like the stipulation that like, hey, this player's a max, so you're going to pay them X percentage of the cap?
Yeah, so
so like it goes up if the cap goes up, right? Your deal. What these deals do is they lock in like a number, they lock in price certainty. So even though we're looking at these and feel like, Suggs, he feels a bit rich. Maybe the Magic are saying, hey, in 3 years, the cap's going to go up so much that like none of this matters. Right?
And I feel like this happens.
It's going to be a value play. Yeah. So, well, it'll sticker shock, but it's probably just par for the course business.
Yeah. I think that's exactly as it is. As we see LeBron and Bronny getting to share the court.
Oh, is it happening right now?
Yeah, it's happening
as we record, people.
As we record, they get their moment, which is nice for the Braun family. I guess the Braun family.
The James family.
So the James family. I'm all over the place. So I guess the non-extensions I think are interesting too, with Kuminga and Giddey. We know that Kuminga has had maybe frustration with how Warriors have kind of operated in the past, and I don't think this lessens that at all. But I think it's also fair. I think he's always wanted to put himself where he's wanted to be able to prove himself and prove his worth to a basketball team, and I think felt like he hasn't had full opportunity with the Warriors in their system. So I think betting on himself here makes a lot of sense. I think it makes sense for the Warriors. Like, they haven't treated him as a guy that they've really put at the front like that as they have other guys in the past. So I think on their end, they need to see it as well. So I think on both sides, it kind of makes sense, even if it did happen. And Josh Giddey just getting traded to a new place. He kind of just has to show what he can do in this new place.
Yeah. Like, to me, Josh Giddey's a simple rejection, because they're probably offering him stuff based on what he was doing in Oklahoma. He didn't have a great end to his playoffs. So there's like a lot of negotiating against him going on, I can imagine, when it comes to Chicago. Plus his new role and opportunity is going to give him such an opportunity to put up like numbers that like, I think he's got a real chance of earning that max. The interesting one to me is Kuminga, because for the longest time it felt like Golden State was holding on to Kuminga and Moses Moody and Podziemski, partly because they're like, okay, well, like we're going to hand this team over. Like this is our next core. This is our next generation. But if you don't pay them and you negotiate them almost off your team, like Moses Moody didn't even get paid a lot. I hope you're really enjoying this moment, LeBron, because you're going to be playing in Golden State later. All right, they're going to trade it all for you.
they have to do something. They have to do something with these guys if they want to commit to Steph and Dre, like they keep saying they want to. They weren't able to get Lauri Markkanen. They weren't able to get Paul George in the offseason, so they're still stuck with these young guys. I think Podziemski, I think, is one guy that feels like he's going to stay, which is, I think, maybe adds to Kuminga's frustration. That he doesn't get that same push that Podziemski seems to be getting. So I think it will be interesting because I think, like you say, they've wanted to use these guys in the big trade. That big trade hasn't really come yet. And I think they're kind of putting themselves in a situation where they're going to be forced to make that tough decision of, are we a Steph team or are we a future team, and what that looks like. I think this year will be telling.
I think like if we were to like look at that right now, I think 3 years ago when they first got those guys, I think the argument was much stronger for we could really bet on becoming a future team. Now that those guys have kind of come along, nobody's had a superstar push. Podziemski is a starter. Wiseman's gone. He was a second overall pick. Kuminga, is Kuminga even a starter yet? Moody's not a starter.
Moody's not started. Kuminga starts sometimes, not full
right?
time.
Like, you could still be Pascal Siakam and have a little bit of a late star jump, but at this point, I think we kind of know who Jonathan Kuminga is, and we know who these guys are, and they're nowhere near the type of players that you want to build a whole new franchise around. So to me, the decision to wait and see what you have just put you back in the Steph conversation. This is Steph's team, Steph's timeline. He's probably still get one more in him if you can find him the right help, right? Yeah, maybe two if you find him like the perfect help.
If you find him the perfect team, he can still contribute greatly. We just saw it in the Olympics.
Yeah,
like he saved them. Like he's still a top player when it's all said and done. So I think yeah, it's tough. It's tough if you're going to say, but yeah, you've waited this out so long that now none of those guys pan out in the way that you want them to pan out, that you kind of are back in that Steph build, and you got to kind of regain that cachet. Now, we're going to jump into some breakouts now. So two guys I want to talk about is Kuminga and I guess Warriors from a team perspective. It'd be weird to call them a breakout team, but they're really being maybe underlooked this year. They're predicted to be like in the play-in. That's really weird, I think, from a Steph-led team. Like even though I don't even expect them to be that good, just the fact that he's the leading guy on that team and they're just automatically put in that 10 spot. Could we be poised for them to have a little bit of a surprise year, or is the West too strong for that?
No, I could see Golden State being like solidly a playoff team. I don't think they're going to challenge at the very top, but like if they make a trade or two, things could change. But yeah, I mean, I think they're going to overperform expectations. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. I think that chance is there, and if that is to happen, I think a big part of that would be if what Kuminga brings. They're going to need a spark somewhere, especially if a trade doesn't happen early on. They're going to need a spark from somewhere. I do like Moody's game, but I don't think it's panned out as much as they've liked. Like, it's been great. Podziemski, as you said, as we talked about earlier, has looked good. They have full confidence in him. But I think Kuminga, he's high up on that most improved player ballot right now. I think if the Warriors are to make a splash this year, even though they're missing a splash brother, it will be because
they got one in Buddy Hield, buddy. They got one in Buddy Hield,
buddy, and one of the best shooters in the last few years.
Yeah,
so they might be okay on the shooting front.
I think a lot of teams are still envious of Golden State's shooting. It's still the bigs, right? And that's why like a Kuminga would be so important because he's part of at least the forward group. Um and yeah, they need some guys closer to the basket as well as all these guys who can like
Shoot,
launch
and
it
to
from
guard,
three.
and to
Yeah,
play
and to
defense.
guard.
The
Yeah.
one thing that they lost with Clay, not only like his shooting wasn't great, like that was a big story and all that, but it was his defense. Like he used to be a really good defender on those wing guys, and he was trustworthy on that end. And then after those injuries, it was kind of you could see that he lost a step on that side of the court,
Yeah.
especially. Like the shot was here and there. You kind of knew that with Clay, but I think the defense is really what hurt them and ultimately led them to not really invest in them moving forward. If they did decide to go the other way, I think they ripped the Band-Aid off with Clay. And if they really want to just break this whole thing down, I think they've kind of gave themselves permission by not keeping Clay Thompson around, as crazy as that might sound.
Yeah, on it honestly, I saw Clay sticking with Steph way longer than Draymond.
Yeah, me too.
So that was probably the biggest shocker of the offseason was Clay like changing teams because it was like
it's gonna be
you
so
kind of
weird.
thought he was you kind of thought he was going to retire a Warrior.
Yeah. I definitely did. I definitely did. So we talk about some of those teams falling off in the East. So if the Sixers do fall down, I think a team that sneakily can kind of make a little rise is the Atlanta Hawks. I'm not usually big on the Hawks. They got rid of DeJounte Murray. They've kind of tried to break it down, but I think when you have those two guys there, you have two wings in Jalen Johnson. You got Zachary there, and you got Trae Young manning an offense. And a Trae Young offense is just a top 10 offense. If he buys into being a little bit less selfish with the ball, he's going to get an assist. But just moving the ball, giving the ball up earlier, and playing without the ball a little bit more, and you're letting those two wings, two massive wings. Play together, I think they could surprise some teams just off of athleticism alone, athleticism and scoring off that wing position alone. Um, yeah,
No,
what are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
I agree. Like I think Atlanta's going to be in a lot more games than people give them credit for. And if you're in a game right to the end and you have Trae Young on your team, you have a big time shot maker. You have a guy who's not afraid to launch it at the buzzer, who's had success doing it in the past. It could be a really good year for Trae. Honestly, it could be perhaps his best year in the NBA so far. And a lot of it comes down to roster construction, to opportunity, to the fact that DeJounte Murray isn't playing for them anymore. It just creates balance on the team. It's one of the problems that like I feel Cleveland has. I don't feel like they have any balance to their roster. So no, I'm with you. I like it. I like it. Yeah, Atlanta. I'm in.
they still have like the DeAndre Hunter there, so there's still some congestion on that wing. But I think having those two guys is like you're invested in those two guys. You pay Jalen Johnson, and I'm sure you're gonna give Zachary his chance to show what he can do as well.
Yeah.
So I kind of like what they could be building up there. It's crazy as in Atlanta over there. Other players that kind of come to mind to me off the top of my head, also from a young team, is Charlotte. In Charlotte is Brandon Miller. Now, I don't think Charlotte as a team is going to shock anybody this year or break out this year, but I think Brandon Miller has a strong chance to take a little bit of a leap going into this year. I think halfway through the year last year, you start to figure things out a bit. He's looking more and more like his favorite player there, Paul George, with the way that he plays. So I'm really keen to see what he does this year. I'm really high on what Brandon Miller can do.
As am I, and I just think Brandon Miller is going to be a really solid pro, and like just has such a nice game, and he's got such a good opportunity in Charlotte. You know, he's just one of those guys where you're going to question how long he stays in Charlotte more than anything else. And when you were bringing this up, it got me thinking about the other guy in that draft who wasn't Victor, which was Scoot. I don't think Scoot's ready for a breakout. So like Brandon's ready. Everything about his game, everything about where he ended the season suggests he's ready. Everything about his opportunity suggests he's ready. I just don't know. I don't know if Portland has a plan for their young players outside of we'll just play them and hopefully they get better.
Yeah. No, I think it's tough on that front, but I do think something that works in his favor too is having LaMelo. Next to him, I think healthy LaMelo. Last year, LaMelo was really banged up, so I think that kind of stunted his growth. I think having LaMelo there to take some of that ball handling duty and just be able to set them up in places. LaMelo's such a great playmaker; he's going to get you some easy ones. So I think the addition of LaMelo and hopefully he can stay healthier this year will make a big difference for Brandon Miller as well.
I agree. And I'm a big fan of LaMelo, honestly, and like I like to make a lot of fake trades that involve LaMelo because I think he can solve a lot of what ails a lot of teams. But that's exactly why Charlotte doesn't want to get rid of him. They want to pair him with guys like Brandon Miller. Miles Bridges gets great numbers because of LaMelo Ball getting him the ball the right opportunities. You said you didn't have a lot of you're not expecting a lot from Charlotte, but I think they're going to do like one tier better than everybody's expecting them to be just like one of the worst teams in the league. Mm-hmm. I have a feeling that like they're going to be fighting for a play-in spot.
Right.
That's kind of where I feel like only vibes tell me that,
Yeah, and they have a new coach. They got Charles Lee as their coach now, young guy. So maybe he can inject something new into the new life into them. They can buy into someone like that. Yeah, it's tough. They're just such an undisciplined team at times. It's just crazy to watch them. It's hard for me to picture them in a playing situation. But those guys are getting older now, and at some point, they have to play a little bit quote unquote mature basketball. I think I think having a guy like Brandon Miller there who's going to be a better player helps that out. You see a guy with talent, you want to win games. He's going to want to drive winning. LaMelo's going to want to win. He's lost enough. So I think they're at a stage now where they might want to win. And if that is the case, that will push him into the play-in. I was going to ask you about Scoot Henderson. I did. So you have no faith in him actually panning out this year, like maybe in the future, but this year you think he's still like a year or two away.
I have faith in the player. I just don't have faith in the situation as it currently stands.
It's a very rough situation over there.
Yeah, like they've got a lot of guys over there. Because there's like Alfrini, there's Shaden Sharp, there's Scoot. They did trade Malcolm Brogdon.
Yeah, they freed that up. Yeah,
they freed that up finally. But you're also trying to get like Jeremy Grant his touches.
Yeah, him out. Yeah.
DeAndre Ayton's there. He demands a certain amount of touches. I think Portland requires like direction and a really like strong like person to come in and be like, this is how we're gonna do it. And we're just gonna ride or die. And it's the same thing with like Houston, right? Where it's like a couple of these teams just need somebody to come in and say, hey, like now's the time. This person plays this role, this person plays that role. Everybody else is traded or expendable to fill in our holes so that we're a team that's competing. Maybe competing just means like getting into the playoffs and getting to the second round. But
having a good NBA Cup run.
Yeah, look at the effect that had for Indiana though. They had a good NBA Cup run. They decided last year was the year that they were going to do something, so they got Pascal Siakam. Yeah. And they got all the way to the conference finals, right? Like, and now we enter this season looking at Indiana, and the expectations are that's a playoff team. They're probably a trade or two away from real contention, but they could do it. They're right there. They're just waiting for the right opportunity. And I would rather be a team that's like waiting for the right opportunity than a team that is just accumulating assets that don't fit together. And that's what Portland feels like to me. That's what Houston's beginning to feel like to me. There's a little bit of that in Detroit, and I feel like Utah's just entered that conversation where they're like, we're just gonna get talent and
figure it out.
Yeah.
I think with Portland, so we don't talk about much with. I think first of all, I think you're like spot on with that assessment, and I think I think we don't talk much about coaches on the hot seat anymore. But I think when you talk about bringing a team together and kind of laying down the law and just establishing some type of quote unquote culture within the team, you still got A in there. You
Says
still got
the Heat fan.
Says the Heat fan. You might need a different type of coach because Bill has been there now for a few years. We haven't seen much improvement on that end in terms of any of these things, cohesion, anything really on the court. So I wonder if we start to look at, I mean, that's usually the first thing that goes is the coach. So I wonder if this is the year, or if this is the year that they finally let go of Chauncey and start to kind of restructure this thing so they can really make something of it. Because you drafted Donovan Clingan, but then you also have DeAndre in there, and you also have Robert Williams there if he ever gets healthy. So it is a very like tricky roster situation that they got going on over there that really needs some attention.
Yeah, it's and I think that more than anything is what's going to hold Scoot back, right? If Scoot was, in a position where he had the ball all the time, could go out and make mistakes, that's really good. Or if he was in a situation like Dillingham in Minnesota, where it's like your role is clearly defined. You are going to be the backup point guard. You are responsible for offense off the bench. This is your role. This is how we win together. Make it happen. That's another pathway for development for him, right? Right now, it really just feels like we're going to play the guards and the cream of the crop's going to rise.
Right. Yeah.
And maybe trial by fire doesn't always work.
doesn't always work. I think other breakouts just to wrap this up is I can give one from the Heat. Do you have any from the Raptors that you would like that you think might have a breakout year, whether it was Quickly, Barrett, Grady?
I would like to think that like Barrett continues what he showed from last year. Just like played really well in Canada, both for the Olympic team and after getting traded to the Raptors. Just his efficiencies went way up from his New York days. If that's going to be what RJ Barrett is, great. But that was last year's breakout. Quickly, he got the opportunity to be a lead guard after the trade last year. I would like to see more of a breakout when it comes to like playmaking and really just being like lead guard kind of stuff. Because I think his shooting and his scoring is all going to stay kind of the same. Scotty's gonna take another step. Grady Dick's the obvious one, but it's that second year player syndrome, right? Where it's like, well, you kind of expect the second year player
kind of should be better,
to be better, right? But it looks like he could get an opportunity to be a starter as well, and if he breaks out, the team makes a lot more sense. So that would be nice for the Raptors. The one I'm thinking of is a third-year player, though, that we haven't talked about, and he's a Houston player. It's Jabari Smith Jr. I think it's the year that Jabari Smith really kind of maybe doesn't become a superstar, but becomes one of those players in the Michael Porter Jr., Brandon Ingram realm, right? Where it's like you're a secondary star and you have like really good skill set, and I think that's what Jabari could be. And I hope that happens this year. I think that brings some clarity.
Yeah, that could bring some clarity both ways if he pans out or if he doesn't pan out. I think on either end of that, especially because I was thinking about them earlier. I was just thinking about ways that they can get Amin Thompson some minutes. I'm like, how can this happen in this just jammed up team? And I thought one way would be if Jabari doesn't have a good year. I think that's where some minutes can come from. They did try him at bigger positions last year, and they just kind of like had him run guard but be big. which seems to be the case for a lot of these things. So my worry with Jabari is that he ends up like a John Collins type. He's a better defender. Like I'll just buy it on. He's better defender than John Collins is. I just let's get that out the way. But on the offense, where it's a guy who can kind of stretch the floor, he is good at attacking the basket, but he doesn't really have the handles himself to create himself, and that was a worry when he got drafted. He is a good rim runner. But he can spot up, he can shoot, but is he the guy that you really want shooting? Like he can shoot, he's a good shooter, but he's not really who you would love to be running your offense through from that perspective. So my worry, my concern, I think, with Jabari Smith, it's crazy. I was just thinking about this like yesterday, is that if he doesn't pan out, if he turns into a John Collins type player with defense, is that where Min tries to get some of his minutes? Does that free up some of the time for some of these other guys?
So Amin and Asur, like they both have the same challenge. They're not very good 3-point shooters. They're not very good 2-point shooters. But they're incredibly athletic playmakers who can dribble, who can play defense, who can rebound, who can do pretty much everything else. So I don't think like, because Jabari plays the 4, he doesn't play the 5. And I don't think that's a good place for Amin, because the modern day 4 spends more time behind the 3-point line, especially like in the corner or attacking from the corner. So unless it's all just like baseline drives and backdoor cuts, like I think Amin makes more sense as your primary ball handler, or weirdly enough, as the small ball center, because of his like crazy athleticism and ability to disrupt. Yeah.
They tried him out there last year too, I think, as center a few times too, which would be interesting. This Houston team is going to be something else to monitor throughout the year, because they have a lot of questions, a lot of questions going on over there. I think, yeah, for my breakout players, we get to the end. It's 50-ish minutes. And, where's the time go? Is on the Heat is Nikola Jovic, not Jokic, Jovic. I think he can have a pretty special year this year, at least for the Heat. Not maybe special in terms of the entire NBA, but I think for the Heat and what they're trying to accomplish. I think in that starting lineup now, you're seeing Tyler so far take more of an off-ball role, accepting that role and realizing that, yeah, he's a really good off-ball shooter. He could be more Klay Thompson than Steph Curry. Like, that's always been a thing with him. If he could lean more Klay, some great things can happen. It seems like he's leaning into that right now, but we'll see if that trend continues or not when things get tight. But I think the real key to making the Heat work, and if they're going to have another run at being a playoff team without having to fight through the play-in, is if Jovic can secure that 4 spot. He looks like he's a little bit more ready to do it this year. He can ball handle, he can catch and go, he could shoot. The shot's always been my worry with him, like since entering the league. He's always been a willing shooter, but it's been inconsistent. So if that is tidied up, I think he provides a real big mismatch opportunity for the Heat on the offensive end. It gives them the ability to play a 5-out with Bam now shooting threes in preseason and having defenses respect that. So if Jovic is able to hold his own and on the defensive end where he's made some strides, I think he can have one of those breakout years and have a sneaky good like statistics here where he's getting like not a lot of points. It'll be like 10 and but 10, 6 and 6, where it's just like he's doing everything, has a hand in everything, and plays solid defense as well.
So we've talked about a couple players being like, this team will go as far as X player. Is Jovic that player for the Heat? Does he, like, if he breaks out and has that season, is that the glue that holds the Heat together? Or if he, goes the other way and turns into a pumpkin, like, just like, the magic's gone, is the magic gone for the Heat as well? And do they trade Jimmy Butler to Houston?
Yeah, Houston really needs to do that trade, by the way. they really need to do that. I think with Jovic, their ultimate ceiling will be with Jovic playing well. They can replace, like, if he is not doing his job, they can play Highsmith as their 4 and just go defensive route and just worry about things on that end, and they'll still be all right. But I think to see them at their ultimate best, the best that you can envision this team, I think Jovic needs to be that glue guy. And again, not necessarily someone who is like an all-star level player, even just a solid role guy who's moving the ball, setting guys up, taking the shots when it comes to him, taking mismatches when it comes to him, and playing solid defense. That's the main thing. If he's able to bang on the defensive end, I think he has a solid role there, and he would be the piece that catapults him to the front. If he doesn't, then yeah, I think it kind of stifles that. They'll be a fine team, but not near the ceiling. Not bad enough to blow it up, but they'll be just in that middling place. Because I think you can still replace him with Highsmith. You still have Hami Jaquez, who just will have to take a bigger role. But I think Jovic is the ideal player that you're kind of banking on works there.
Well, and then like, you know, Khalil Ware is still a bit of an unknown. Like he is a center, but to me, like he always seemed like a really mobile center who likes to like shoot. So he's like supposed to be a stretch big. Can he play the 4? And is he or
can he's
he
playing
push
the 5
Bam?
And Bam's playing the 4.
Right?
Yeah. Which I think will be, if you ask a lot of Heat fans, they can't wait for the possibility of that. Me, I'm a little more. I'm okay on it. Like it's nice. It's nice to have the option. I think what's great for the Heat is if you can have the option to do both. You have the option to have a big lineup with Bam and Keller, and it makes sense. If that works, then great, do it. And if you want the option of going a little smart, whether it would be Highsmith, Jovic, Hami, one of these other guys playing the 4 that you're accustomed to in the past. I think that's the enticing thing about Khalil Ware, is that if he can pan out, and I think it's going to take some time. But when and if he pans out, I think it just creates another option for them. And then, yeah, I guess if Jovic doesn't pan out in the way that you want, then you have that as another thing in your back pocket to look forward to in the future.
Heat are interesting, man. Like, you know, a lot of these teams, I was saying, like, they just got to pick a direction, and they just drag their heels and they just won't make that choice. Whereas, like, I think by the end of this year, the Heat are, you know, either like doubled down on this core and like really trying to improve and have traded like maybe like a Tyler, right? Or they've made the decision, and like Jimmy Butler's been traded, and everywhere that they can find value, they're finding value. But at the same time, they're looking for the next star to come in here, because they're making every move with the idea of, this is not a team that, like, the Heat do not strike me as a team that bottom feeds.
Yeah, they'll take assets to get a start.
Yeah, they'll just do whatever they can to find a new star and build their team around that.
Yeah. Which I think it is really interesting on their front what they can do. And the thing that's sneakily they're creeping up with a young core there. They got Hami, they got Jovic, Tyler's still kind of young. Pele Larson, who he got in the second round, is looking good. They got
I always forget about Pele.
So they have a sneaky like young group of guys now that could take the mantle if they do decide to go the other way and just like get rid of Jimmy and some of the old guys and just build around some of the youth there. So they've created themselves a little bit more room for options with drafting just well. I think without anything else before we head out.
Good for LeBron and his son. You know, that is a cool history making moment. And one that the NBA should be proud of. But you know, let's let Bronny play. Like, let's
Bronny be Bronny.
Just give him some space. Let him develop. Let him figure out who he's gonna be. And like he shouldn't have more news articles about his play than like Jokic has about his plays.
Yeah, right? Like it's going to be a lot. It's like no 55th overall draft pick has been covered like this. It's pretty insane.
No.
I feel kind of bad for the kid. But
yeah, that's where I'm at. Like
yeah.
You know, I love LeBron, and this feels more of like more of like a LeBron accomplishment.
Yeah.
A Bronny welcome to the NBA. You made the NBA accomplishment. Right. Like, it's more like, hey, you've been playing for so long. You're now playing with your children.
Old man.
Yeah. Right. Also, 22 years for LeBron, joining Vince Carter as the only players to play in 22 seasons.
Look at that. We got history to end on. Thank y'all for listening to the NBA Hangout presented by Playbook Sports. I'm your host, Ben, and with me here is Dave. You can follow me at BJAY93_. You can follow us at the NBA Hangout _ on Twitter, on Instagram. Put some clips there, put some stuff on Twitter. You can find me. You can find us here every week. You can find Dave here every week since he doesn't have social media. So you can find Dave here every week. Thank y'all for hanging out. Wait, before we go, like and subscribe. We are on YouTube. You can see us visually. There's audio, podcast, Apple, Spotify, all those fun things. Thank y'all.